After this kind introduction, Julie, nothing can go wrong, of course. I think that is good. I mean, we're talking a bit about the coaching, about the motivation of people. And we had two fantastic speakers here today, and what I will try to do, I have no slides, so I can do that freely, to adapt my story to those parts that I either think we can sort of reinforce a bit, and there might be some areas where I might have a slightly different view, or I might provoke your imagination a bit. And because that's ultimately what I like to do. I'm not a trained coach or master in the art. All the stuff that I learned, which is I think how most people learn, is because I did it wrong. And that's perhaps the first point. If you forget all the other thing I'll be talking about between now and hopefully at the 11th floor, splendid view over Amsterdam over a glass of wine, is that learning really comes through doing something and then falling on your nose and it doesn't feel good and then you try it again. So it's so important, as we all aspire to be leaders, at a very basic level, that we ask ourselves the question, are we allowing ourselves to make mistakes? And do we create an environment around ourselves where we actually applaud that same behavior? Now, I can tell you that is not a natural thing for large enterprises to do. So when you're all sitting here nodding and say, yes, of course, Gerard, then I would say, I want to talk more, because it's hard. Because it's not a very natural thing to do. Now, I bought myself 3 weeks ago a hoverboard. Now, a hoverboard, I mean, you have to use my imagination. I don't have a slide pack. Is one of those two wheels. You stand on it. There's nothing else. And then when you move a bit forward, you go forward. And when you move a bit back, etc. And being me, which I'm an optimistic kind of individual, bought a hoverboard from Amazon. By the way, great service. I'm not a shareholder, but it worked out well. Got it delivered at my house, unpacked the box, was so excited, my hoverboard. Started practicing at home. After 5 minutes, I thought I mastered the art. Took the thing out on the street, and first came my first street, where I suddenly noticed that my very nice flat floor in the house was a bit different than the real street. So what happened? I was doing 10 miles, and then I, of course, fell flat on my nose. And then a very important thing happened. I suddenly remembered what I teach other people. And that is a very interesting thing. So as you're most professional or managers, we talk a lot to people about things, like going out of your comfort zone. But how often do we do it ourselves? How often do I actually get out of my comfort zone? Now, that was definitely out of my comfort zone. It was not very, I mean, I could show my knees. It's not very sexy. They're hairy legs, wide legs, but they have slight spots on them because I fell flat on my knee. So when it comes to coaching and mentoring and leadership, it's fundamentally important that you help people to learn. And if you want to help people to learn, you need to create a sense of comfort around making mistakes. And what I want to talk a bit about is some of the leadership behaviors that come with that. I want to talk a bit about coaching, how I see it, making it sustainable, because it's very nice that you come out pumped up and all happy, and it is, what is it, tomorrow morning, Thursday morning, and you've got all these great ideas. And you know what, by Friday and when the weekend has passed, by Monday morning you forget all the whole thing. So it's also quite important to find ways to make some of the things you learn, not too many, into a routine, so that your changed behavior becomes a routine, and then the likelihood is that you will actually benefit from it a bit longer. Then I'll talk a bit about team. Because we all have, I have certainly a long list of things I'm bad at. And Julie was very nice, but there's a large organization. I work for Shell, and I work for the downstream bit of it. That employs about 34,000 people direct and about 1 million people indirect. 500,000 people working at 45,000 retail sites serving 25 million customers is 8% of my business. It's massive. I got a team of 600 people, and if I would be all the things that this team need, I would be a Superman. I'm definitely not. And my wife, who's a psychologist who gives me a lot of feedback at home, tells me all the time. And then my 21-year-old daughter adds to the picture. And by the way, a minority at home. So it's a female home. I'm the male. So if you want to talk about chick flicks, we can have fantastic stories, because I always have to watch it. I managed to escape this weekend. I actually did watch, because my wife actually fancies the guy James Bond. But anyhow, and then I want to talk about performance, because all this stuff, and that's the second thing that I want you to remember, you don't learn without making mistakes, and all of this is, how they say in German, für die Katz, completely irrelevant if it doesn't drive performance. So I can feel very excited about, and I can create that huge buzz in the team, and we can do all these exercises where I fall back and somebody catches me and I feel good, all that sort of stuff. But ultimately, that business that I'm in, and I hope all of you are, is a very competitive environment. So all these sort of good things need to be translated in some shape or form into day-to-day delivery, competing that environment in which you operate. So we talked a bit about leadership and leadership characteristics. Within Shell, we had a very elaborate system because we are engineering companies, and we had planets, and we had a lot of them. I mean, sometimes I did the test how many of these planets as an HR professional I actually remembered, and typically I forgot about half of them, which is one of my weaknesses, by the way. I'm not very detail-oriented. So I'm an 80-20 kind of person. That sounds a lot better than that you're chaotic. So we had all these leadership planets, and we worked for them for about 10 years. And I got involved in them, and I said, well, you have to make this a bit simpler. When it comes to leadership attributes, it's really not so important what they are, but can you actually frame people's hearts and minds around them so that you can create a common language into your organization? So after endless debate and research, and then we looked at all kinds of companies, we said, there's really 4 important things that we want our leaders to do. And one of the words already came up earlier today. We really want our leaders to be authentic. Why is that? People actually like to know who they work for. Now the interesting thing is we immediately got a bit of a problem with that authenticity, because when we started to roll that out in 2012, we had these leaders who are a bit assholes. So you have these leaders, even in Shell, that happened. So we had these team sessions where they really misbehaved, some people. And then I had a conversation, because I didn't do that in the team, but afterwards, and I said, hey, what are you doing? And they said I was authentically angry. I mean, you're propagating this new leadership set of behaviors. What are you bullshitting with me? I mean, this is. So I said, yeah, I have to remember. You have to remind something. I mean, underlying any of these great leadership things is something that hopefully is important for your company as well, and that is respect for people. And it's so nice because it's like peeling an onion. So you take an attribute and you dig a bit deeper and you say what's underneath. So respect for people, and I hope all your companies have that high. Because, by the way, values, when they're on the wall, I always get worried. I mean, culture is lived. It's not something that you hang on the wall. When it's hanging on the wall, like work-life balance, bad news. When work-life balance charters are on your wall, then you don't have one. Second thing we look at for leaders is a very obvious skill, but it's a really difficult one, and that's collaboration. Collaboration. And let's reflect a bit on that, because a lot of people, when I talk about collaboration, they think talking with people, like I just saw happening, which always happens, is that people group who are sort of curious about each other, and that's mostly because they either speak the same language or they come from the same company. We had a nice cluster of Rabobank just now, which was good. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's a typical human behavior. That's not collaboration, not in the sense of leadership. The most important thing when it comes to collaboration for leadership is building bridges and alliances with people that are different than you. And I always say to people, the earlier you learn that skill, the better. So when I address groups of graduates, I say there's a very simple thing you do. You go to your department, and I'm sure, and people always smile in the audience when I say that, there's this oddball. There's this weird person who sits behind this desk in a corner doing something, you don't know what it is, but you don't feel obliged to actually go and sit next to that person and ask them what they're doing, or why they're doing it. And I said, the sooner you learn that skills to collaborate with people who are different than you, there are 2 things that will happen. Firstly, you might be inspired by that person because he or she might be doing something really fascinating. But the second, probably more important thing for a leader, you start to create a followership. Because these people will be inspired by you, because you might be the only one of that department who actually has that insight, that idea to sit next to them. And suddenly, and by the way, people love talking about diversity, this is inclusive behavior. Inclusive behavior far more important than diversity, because you can create diversity with everybody doing the same thing, and then you don't benefit from it as an enterprise. So I think collaboration, important.
That should be collaboration in an authentic manner.
That's true. That's a very good point you're making, because I have these people who come to my room, It doesn't matter where it is in the world. And they just went to a course that it's important to look at people's body language. It's always fascinating when I have these conversations, and they still happen. So you sit here and you have a conversation with somebody, and I do this. And I see the other person doing the same. So I think, okay, let's have some fun. So I do this. And they mimic the same behavior. And I said, so you went, and I'm not exaggerating. You have people who believe that the human mind is such that we can actually fool. But it's not only that we watch people's body language, we actually also see the subtlety of it. And if it's just bullshit, we capture that very quick as well. So very important. The third one I want to talk about is growth. And you know what? I've always these conversations with the CFO in our company. I mean, for the finance people, I hope there are a few here, but I don't mean it in a bad way, but most people don't get out of bed in the morning for a return on average capital employed. And it is amazing how many strategies of organizations are, when you basically drill it down to its essence, they talk to you in financial metrics. Free cash flow from operations. Who the hell gets out of bed from the morning for that purpose? So if you want to growth in your organization, if you want to inspire people, Mr. CFO, don't use only yes, of course, you need financial metrics because then you have investors, then you want to know where you're a sound company, all that sort of shit. But please talk about your product and what it does to the world. Or talk about your service and how it's different from others. I mean, use a language that human beings understand. And ROI is not that language that people get terribly excited about. So growth is another thing from a leadership capability, is also your capability as a leader to make an honest assessment about where you are right now. And watch the word honest there, because that's really hard. It requires to objectively look at the situation you have, not only in the context of your own company, but also in the context of the outside world. Because the larger your company, the more I've seen is that people start to believe that the world is all about, this is not a theoretical thing, this Shell does exactly the same thing, so it's all about Shell. It's called baloney, we're just one company, there are gazillion companies around there. So if you define growth in a language that is appealing to people, and it doesn't, by the way, have to be a for-profit organization. Whatever group of people, you want to get excited about something, whether it's the depth of your skills, the capability of you to care for more people when you're running a hospital, it doesn't really matter. It's really important that you create that. The other thing is growth comes with making mistakes. I get back to my first point. If you want people to learn something, and if you want growth, and it's so bloody hard for an engineering company. And my father-in-law, who's a deep engineer, always said, yeah, you have all these nice talks, but if you invent a rocket that would go to the moon, it would just miss it. And you would. It is of course true. That's why I wouldn't actually create a rocket that goes to the moon. I mean, I would clap when somebody else does it, and hopefully it lands there. But very, very important as well. And if you have all these, there's one more, and that is the performance. And I promise to come back to that a couple of times. There's a diversity angle to performance, and given that we have a majority female in the room, I cannot help myself. People don't get it. If you do good work, many organizations don't see it. If you don't describe your point A when you came to a job in a language that's very clear and crisp, like an elevator pitch, don't expect the rest of the world to see that you're actually doing fantastic things. I've been leading majority female teams for more than 12 years. Is a very common point, and I find it all around the world. Men like to talk about their achievements, female typically less so. And that is not helpful for career advancement. But it's also for men. Be really clear about the point A. What did you find when you came to an organization? And then from a leadership perspective, whatever level you are, be really clear about where you want to be. Your point B, or however you want to describe it. And invest some time in making that a simple story. Because I found out if people take 5 minutes to describe where they are right now and where they want to be, you've lost your audience. That's why it's called an elevator speech. Elevators typically don't take 5 minutes unless somebody pushed the panic button, and then you have a different problem. So I think the real thing here is there's a massive amount of value, and that comes to inspiration for leaders to spend time on how they express performance, how it's linked to growth, how they want to collaborate to get there, and then how authentic they are. So something I found out after a lot of years I actually enjoy helping people to be the best they can be. And I did choose the wrong study. I became a lawyer. And I became a lawyer because I'm also, I love drama. And I watched American television series. I mean, nowadays you would call it Netflix, yeah? Suits, I mean, isn't it great? So, and then I started working, of course. And I found out that there was this small desk, there was no windows, it's a bit like this. There was this huge pile of paper here. And I was supposed, for a period of about 5 years, to move that stuff to there. And the very exciting things they wanted me to be busy with was 2 cars collided, who's guilty? And it's so important when I do my work where I try from a leadership perspective to help people to be the best they can be, to make very honest decisions. And I did. So I started practicing law, really didn't like it. And after 6 months, I stood out there over lunch, and I never forget that moment because it feels really shitty. Because I didn't know, for about a period of 10 years, I knew what I wanted to be. And then you stand there and then you think, I was absolutely clear that it wasn't going to be me becoming a lawyer for the rest of my life. But I try to help people, and I get energy out of the fact that careers are not about what your mother wants for you. It's not about what your father wants for you. It's not about what your bigger brother wants out of you. It's not what your schoolmates are very exciting about. And the problem is, and I think it came through in the earlier presentation, you're at a very influenceable age, between 16, 17, 18 years old. And you know what? That's exactly when many of these decisions are made. And sometimes the fact that you are influenceable creates choices that are not yours. And you will be surprised how many people, leaders included, in organizations are playing a role in something that they really don't enjoy. And it's really important in our professional line of work that we identify these people very early on, because they will very rarely create value for the enterprise. And the funny thing is, if you have that honest conversation with somebody and they go through this Sarah curve or whatever you want to call it, they're typically very happy. And some of these people have become my best friends, but they don't work as a leader anymore. So perhaps this a bit about the leadership part. I did mention diversity and inclusion when it comes to collaboration. Perhaps there's one more thing to say about that. Leading diverse team is actually difficult. So we have to be honest to organizations about it. It's easier to have a team of a lot of people who are like-minded, speak the same language, have a bit of the same background, etc. The reason we want diversity is because we want diversity. We want diversity of thought. We want diversity of outcome. We want creative people and analytical people and optimistic people and pessimistic people. And they look at a complex problem and hopefully a better outcome will result. And a lot of the problems that we had with diversity drives, also sometimes supported by leaders, is they were all focused on the hard side of diversity, which is counting numbers. How many females do we have in an organization? By the way, we're not where we need to be. That's a different issue, but very important one. But diversity of thought is something different. And I think from a leadership perspective, in the complexity of the environment in which we operate, I think it's hugely important to get that right. Which then gets you a bit into coaching. I mean, the point was made, so I don't want to elaborate it too much. I only want to say listening is hard. If you think that you're listening to somebody, think again. And I think Julie put it out there, that you put your head in a frame of mind where you 100% focus on the individual that you're talking with. And it's not a very natural thing to do. I don't have my phone, it's somewhere there for a purpose. We are distracted. And the reason why I learned listening, apart from the feedback I got from my wife, is that I saw great leaders do it to me. So out of the wild west that their desks were, with phones ringing and all kind of other shit, they found 30 minutes to zoom in completely in me. And the outcome was amazing. It is inspirational. You feel literally listened to. But very importantly, the person who does that with you becomes somebody that you want to do your very best for. Now that sounds very basic, but part of leadership is also creating an environment where people are prepared to do things for you when you don't ask. And in the more complex world where we live, it's very rarely the talent or people's capability that is the limiting factor. It's more people's mindset. Are they prepared to actually do the extra mile and step up for you? So that's a really important point on the coaching thing. And I do believe there's another thing if you do that well, and I will give a few practical hints about how you can set that up. You can start to capture the essence of an individual that is working in your team rather than just 60 or 70%. And we can have a debate whilst we watch Amsterdam on the 11th floor, but I think most companies shall not exclude it. So I'm a man on a mission, that's why I hope they will allow me to be in my job a bit longer. We probably capture 60, 70% of people. So they're the full individual when they come out of bed in the morning. They might be a bit sleepy, but they have their artistic selves. They might play guitar, they might do theater. They might do all kind of thing in their private life, which is their full personality. And then they come to work and then we make that small box for them. My own function, human resources, is helping with that. This is your box. And there we have Hay evaluation in our organization. We do too, which by the way is very interesting. So Hay gives points for complexity. Hey, that's funny. And we try to have simple organizations. Huh? Is that interesting? Hay gives Hay points for a lot of working capital. And we try to make more money with less. So my function, and they never liked that when I talk to my functional leaders about that. And I have less and less because I'm one myself right now, so I'm talking to myself. These sort of things sometimes don't help. But just imagine, I don't know how many people work in your company, that you can capture 10% more of the individual. And it's a very interesting thing if you think about that concept for a while. It's not only 10%, it's far more than that. Because you get that unique characteristic of an individual that people are leaving home right now because they're not comfortable bringing it to the table. And you know what? In this VUCA world that everybody talks about, that is volatile and uncertain and chaotic, that's exactly what we want. And I like to think that good coaches as leaders have the capability to tap into that extra 10-20% of people and get far better performance. And we're now able to actually manage to measure this. So we do questionnaires, 80,000 questions. We've done it the last 12 years, people surveys, and we measure engagement scores, also at team level. And we can see those team leaders who are doing better, they then get promoted, because in our talent management we connected these two. So we look at people not 1 year, because they can be shitty year or a reorganization, whatever, but trend lines, 5 years. People's engagement score over 5 years go gradually down. I mean, that starts to become a question mark, whether people's capabilities where it needs to be. So my point is, and that's ultimately what it's all about, this performance, good leadership and good coaching, in a relatively simple way, can get you to this, the perhaps not 100%, and also that's perhaps not what we want, but 70 or 80 is a lot more than 60. The other thing, by the way, when you do that, is people feel listened to. And that's where engagement starts a bit. They feel the desire to bring in their skills and the capability, and sometimes also their creativity. So I think that if coaches can achieve that as leaders, I think that's a very good thing. Let me talk a bit about sustainability. Sustainability starts with the notion that changing people's behavior is really difficult. I don't know if you have ever tried to change behavior. Can somebody tell me a reflection on that point? People are smiling, so you recognize.
You can succeed for some time, but then you drop back.
Okay. And any example that you want to give, or you dare in this group of friends? Yeah. Les amis?
Yes, I can be quite easily irritated.
Ah, very good.
I think that don't work out like that.
Yeah.
And once when I was coming to
Yeah.
countries to do workshops,
Yeah.
the hotel did not have my stuff, my training materials, and they kind of lost them, and they weren't interested in finding them. So I got very irritated with the receptionist, who was the only one who would help me.
That's very honest. But you're trying to work on it. You're
Yes,
trying to work.
That's something that I've worked on.
And have you learned the behavior? What is your, we call it then coping mechanism? I mean, we have real psychologists in the room. Take a break.
Yeah.
Count to 10.
Count to 10, walk out. Yeah.
Any other examples of thank you, yeah. Any examples of behaviors you try to change, or things that you, because we're onto something, because we are talking specifically for the HR professionals in this room, we're talking about something important, because we talk about changing behavior all the time.
Yes.
It's actually bloody hard. And what I've learned is if people say it, I always say, That's coaching. How? So I understand that you want to change it, but how? So any other examples for the...
No specific, go ahead.
Ah.
Go ahead.
It's just,
Judith, yeah.
It's maybe a stupid one, but I tend to mess with my hair. There's some people in the room that know me quite well.
Yeah.
I'm always messing with my hair. And at one point I cut my hair short,
Yeah.
just to get rid of it. It did, up until the point where my hair grew longer.
Yes.
So I worked on, yeah.
No, thank you. I mean, Julie, anything you wanted to add there? Or?
No, yeah, okay. I like to find what triggers it. I have a certain behavior of getting angry when something happens.
Yeah.
And things are not going my way.
Yeah.
Basically, so anger, and what triggers it, it's when I have this plan and expectations and then no communication, and then it's off.
Yeah.
And so I'm working hard on trying to identify the trigger before it actually results in the knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah. No, I think that is good. So people develop, and I think for leaders that's very important. By the way, we all have them. And thanks for sharing some. But we all have these idiosyncrasies that, by the way, your team knows about. And they will be watching you when you say that you're going to change your behavior. Because you got feedback from the last, 360, and then people have a smile on their face typically because they know 3 months from now, etc. So I think there are a couple of things that help. I mean, one tip I can give you is routines help. Has helped mankind for a gazillion years. Change routines. And so when you know that you're getting angry, I mean, counting is important. Some people write emails when they're angry. Now, the problem with emails is they end up in, etc. You can print them out and you're reminded of them later. Very good discipline is don't. If you're really angry, then it's 10 times better to actually call the person. and yeah, leave it. Just an aside, but it's amazing how bad by the way, engagement in written form is about resolving emotional issues. As one of the things I do standard when I get to a new job, and I've been to 12 different jobs in my time in Shell, is to stop people writing me an email, copying me in when they have a fight. There's a very simple way to do that. Is you just write an email back to everybody there, say this is the last email of this kind. If you have a problem and you cannot resolve it, you can talk to me. And then very rarely that happens because people then typically try to resolve it. But it is so important. I mean, as a leader, as coach, I'm also mildly lazy, I must say, because when I go to Barcelona for a conference, I like to be on the beach a bit as well. And you know what? Good leaders as coach, if you're good at delegation, if you're good in creating an environment in your company where people actually have the courage to make a decision, there's less coming to me. Whereas when I feel this urgent desire to actually share my wisdom around that specific conflict, I will have a lot of conflicts. And a lot of people do that. And then they get very excited and they say, my inbox is completely full. I said, so let me look at your inbox. I said, you've provoked that yourself. Triggers, really important. And I think it is not really, whatever it is that you want to work on, change your routine around it. It helps, and it works, and it is something that is easier to resist. It's a very simple one about iPhones. How many people have their phone in their bedroom? Honest. Bad idea. So a simple routine. There's this scientific research that says that mobile phones, specifically at night, love kitchens. Specifically being next to an Nespresso machine. So I urge you to learn the routine of parking your phone next to the Nespresso machine. Magic. Magic. It will talk to your Nespresso machine all night. It will not bother you. It will not have beeping sounds. There will be no flashing lights. And there will not be the need for this urgent reflection on this WhatsApp message from somebody who next day you've forgotten about. Or not, which is even worse because then you have a sleepless night. So this is just to prove the point.
It also helps the role modeling.
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
we teach our kids to have the phones downstairs, so there are nicely 4 phones next
Yeah.
to each other.
Very good.
Because if our phones are upstairs and theirs
Yeah.
are downstairs,
So Frank
shit happens.
Frank developed the routine. Now, but I'm half joking on this. It is a disease. It is a disease, and the problem is, and the more serious point is, we have a limited amount of energy. Yeah, if you look at me, you might think this is not true, but even I have a limited amount. I've got a bit ADHD, and I made a living out of it, which is good. But Even I have a limited amount of energy. So at some stage it's just gone. And of course the question about effective leadership is using that limited amount of energy on those areas where you create the most effect. And I can tell you, at 2 o'clock or 2:30 in the night, answering emails is not the best use of the energy, because that time you need sleep, because you will be more effective when you wake up in the morning. So really important to make these things sustainable. Whatever you want to change, and by the way, never more than 1 or 2 things. So these people who have these long list of things they want to change, forget it. It's just completely useless. Team. Team is one of those things I made so many mistakes about, and I'm still learning. I mean, the first mistake I made, it would have been hilarious to actually present the team that I had when I had my first senior serious leadership job. Because they were, just imagine it, people who are a bit like me, which is what you do, because I wasn't trained on being a leader. So I was doing the recruitment job for Shell, and they asked me to do global recruitment, and we didn't have global recruitment. Every country did their own thing. So I went out there and hired people who were very outspoken, rather optimistic, very extrovert, all that sort of stuff. Not detailed planning, not structure and organization, and all that sort of stuff. So within 6 months, we had complete chaos, really complete chaos. And so this is not a theoretical thing. When you coach, help, and support teams, it is so important that, and again, I'll start with my own discipline, human resources, we typically focus in succession plans on individual role for individual people. It's a fundamental mistake. It is important, whether somebody is qualified, etc. There's a threshold that you want to pass. But then the most important other question to ask is, what do you want that person to do in that team? And when I work with leadership teams, I go back there all the time. And they look at me as I come from Mars. I said, no, I don't come from Mars. Martian, great movie, by the way. I haven't watched it yet because it is not on the chick flick list. But it's so important. It's so important to get that right. And then the next question, of course, is what sort of dynamics do you want in the team? And that's ultimately related to what sort of performance. I always say to my learning folks, and we spend a couple of $100 million on learning just in my business. So this is not an irrelevant question. We are not a university, friends. We are not a university. I'm educating, supporting, coaching, leading people because I want better business performance. I want you, when you drive up to the retail side of Shell, being treated just a tick better than at the competition, and there's a likelihood that you will come back. So fundamentally importance when it comes to team is realize how you compensate. First of all for the leader, because leaders have big gaps. We talked about it before. But then also look at what stage of a business are you in. Are you going through a big turnaround? You need a different profile of a team. Is it a sustainable business that you just want marginal improvement every year, 5%? You need a different team. If you need a complete rework because your strategy is failing, because you have been in bricks and the novel thing is clicks, it's not about individuals alone. It is also about how you compose your team. And that's where coaching becomes a very important of line managers, because they tend to focus on individual roles. By the way, I cannot help myself. One other really stupid thing HR departments do is they produce job descriptions. Have you seen them? They're weird, isn't it? They're weird things. They're typically written by somebody else than you, which is of course weird, because it's your job, isn't it? But the other thing is weird is they're typically written with a view on the past, whereas mostly companies want to move ahead. And just on the job description thing, so if you look at a role in a team, I always say to people, one way to get better satisfaction of individual people, but it starts with you, is to shape your role so that your strength, your passion, the things that you're excited about, come to fruition in the way you do your job. So I had a handover with the person who did my job before me, and there was this huge file cabinet, and there was this structured handover file. I still have it. I've never looked in it, but it's still there. It is this huge thing. And in my handover to the person that took over my job, we had a conversation, like we're having right now. So different in styles. It's not necessarily one is better than the other, but if you don't understand what makes people tick, and you look at a job description alone, you will never get to that really fantastic world where that planet of you meets the planet of the work that needs to be done, and in the merger between the two, you unleash a massive amount of energy. And by the way, that also gets you better and a lot closer to people giving 100% or 90% when they get to the work. So team is an important one. But it is more an art than a science. And to sit in a team that's very diverse and know when you have to make a decision, even when some people are not happy, all that sort of stuff, it's not a question of reading a book and then you get it. It's just, I'm constantly practicing still. And it becomes more fun when you learn more about it. I end with performance and then we should open up for conversation. Because there's one more component to performance, apart from the language that you use should be appealing to people. And that is, it should be realistic. I mean, in Shell, we've made so many mistakes that somebody wanted daydreaming an impossible target or a market share that we would never reach. And then there's this philosophy that if you give people stretched targets, they will do their very best. And if you would in the Steve Jobs school or Elon Musk, if you read his book, by the way, about how he started Tesla and where it is right now, there's some people who believe that that's a good idea. I don't believe that it's very sustainable. I think when it comes to performance, people need to have an idea about how they contribute, what they're doing, delivering any value to that specific target that you set out. And that's again where my function, HR, so I have to look at myself in the mirror, is sometimes not helping through this institute of scorecards. You have scorecards in your business? So, no scorecards. So how is performance measured at the end of the year? Yeah, I mean, yeah, basically, yeah, some form of target. The point a bit with these, and I already made the point when I talked about financial dynamics and financial metrics, not always getting people's hearts and minds. With performance, it's really important that you drill down to the individual. And people always talk about SMART, but they very rarely do it. That's why we're still talking about it. And what I always say to people, as long as you give people space to describe the target and what they want to achieve in their own language, and you have what we call a commitment conversation, where you look somebody in the eye, rather than ticking boxes on a form, and you make a contract with the individual and you say, in the context of what I want to achieve, this bigger thing, I really want you to do this and the other, and in return, I will give you every support, financially, coaching, mentoring people to get there. You get a completely different commitment, that's why it's called that way, from the individual. And I think that psychological bonding, in many cases in my company, gets lost in the process, in the forms, in the structures that we build, and they become a purpose in its own right. So here I'm not standing, and I said I would be honest at the beginning, saying that we fixed it. But what I do know for sure is that when it comes to managing people's performance, our capability to do things wrong have been better than our capability to do things right. And I would be curious when we sit here tonight to hear a bit more about how you resolve things. So in summary, when I look at leadership, I look at authenticity, collaboration, growth and performance, but there could be many other things. What is important is, and I say that to leaders in my organization as well, make them real for you. Create meaning for the way you speak about them, create a language about it, make sure that it is not too complex, because that is not really what it is about. Coaching and leadership closely related, but good coaches get not only the best out of people, but also the best out of teams. Sustainability you only create when you change one or two of your behaviors, and start simple. And I made a joke about the phone, but it's an issue in our business. I'm getting replies to emails at really odd hours, and these people are not in Singapore. Team, really important that when you have diversity drives in your organization, that you start to worry more about inclusion. Because we found out in Shell the hard way that it's very easy to get, if you're a large enterprise and you have a strong brand, to get diverse people in. But how quickly is the diversity of that individual killed by the way we do things around here? And I think we all understand what I'm meaning here. And then when it comes to performance, it's really important that you're very clear about what targets you want to achieve. How many business HR partners do we have in the room? HR business partners? Not a lot. I would say to people, I suggest we change that title. And there's the very simple reason for that. I've never come across a marketing leader who calls himself or herself a business partner. This is a bit of a reminiscence of where the human resources function came through. There's only one relevant thing for human resources, and that is being part of the business. And I believe that clarity about what you want to achieve is not something that automatically comes to a function like mine. So one of the things that you might ask yourself, it's good to have a conversation about it, how clear are most of your human resources leader about the specifics of the business that they work for? And when I mean specific, have they been to the factories? Do they understand the production process? When it's a marketing operation, do they really understand how the competition is doing it, where we are differentiating? My experience is, because I ask these questions, there's a lot of work to do there. I do believe that in our function, if we do that better, we will get better performance for our business, but we also make better choices for getting the right people in the right place to hopefully make the right decisions. Thank you.